I'm Ellie Vance, 30 years old, and I've spent my whole life trying to fit into a family that never really wanted me. Grew up in Bar Harbor, Maine, in this picture perfect house. White fence, manicured lawn, the kind of place you'd see on a postcard. But me? I was always the odd one out, the kid who didn't belong. My parents, well, Richard and Susan, since I can't really call them mom and dad anymore, had their golden boy, Ethan, my older brother. He was their son, and I was just some flickering streetlight they barely noticed. I remember being a kid, maybe 7 or 8, busting my ass to make them proud. I'd stay up late studying, aced every test, even won a couple of photography contests at school. You think they cared? Nope. Ethan could fart in the general direction of a football and they'd throw a parade. I still see it clear as day. I'm 16, standing in the school gym at my first photo exhibit, my black and white shots of the harbor pinned up on a corkboard. I was so damn proud. Not one of them showed up. Meanwhile, Ethan makes the varsity football team, barely, mind you. Guy was lazy as hell, and the whole family's there clapping like he cured cancer. I had to walk home that night, 3 miles in the dark, while they went out for pizza to celebrate him. That's when I started wondering, do I even belong here? It wasn't just that they ignored me, it was like I was invisible. Ethan could do no wrong, even when he was a total jerk. He'd borrow my stuff, break it, and laugh. Once, he accidentally spilled soda all over my camera. My first real one, saved up for months to buy it. Susan just shrugged, said, "Boys will be boys." Richard didn't even look up from his newspaper. I'd grit my teeth, swallow the hurt, and keep going. What else could I do? I wanted them to see me, to love me the way they loved him. But no matter how hard I tried, I was never enough. By the time I hit 30, I was done hoping. I'd moved out, got my own place in Bar Harbor, a tiny apartment above a bookstore, smelled like old paper and coffee. I was making a name for myself as a photographer, shooting weddings and local events. Nothing big, but it was mine. I'd see Richard and Susan maybe once a month, mostly out of guilt. Ethan. He was still living in their basement, coasting on their praise, doing jack all with his life. I'd accepted it. I was the spare kid, the one they didn't really need. Fine. I'd built my own world, small as it was. Then I got the call. It was a Tuesday night, raining like hell, and I was editing photos on my laptop, half watching some trashy reality show. My phone buzzed. Susan's name on the screen. I almost didn't pick up. She never called unless she wanted something. When I answered, her voice was sharp, like she was ordering a pizza she didn't have time for. "Ellie, you need to come home. Now." No hello, no how you doing, just that. My stomach twisted. "What's wrong?" I asked. She paused and then said, "It's Ethan. He's sick, really sick." I threw on a jacket, grabbed my keys, and drove through the storm to their house. The whole way, my mind was racing. Sick. Like flu sick. Or something worse. Bar Harbor's streets were empty, just me and the rain slapping my windshield. I passed the bars downtown, people laughing under awnings, clinking beers. I wanted to scream. Why did I feel so off? Like something was crawling up my spine? When I got to the house, Richard was pacing in the living room, his face all tight and serious. Susan was on the couch, clutching a tissue, but her eyes were dry. Ethan wasn't there. Probably at the hospital, I figured. "What's going on?" I asked, still dripping from the rain. Richard didn't even look at me, just said, "Ethan's got a rare condition, bone marrow failure. He needs a transplant." My heart sank. I mean, I wasn't close to Ethan, but he was still my brother. "Okay," I said. "So what do we do?" Susan finally spoke, her voice weirdly calm. "We need you, Ellie. You're his best shot." I froze. Me? His best shot? For what? I didn't get it, not yet. But the way they were staring at me, like I was a tool they just remembered they owned, made my skin crawl. "What do you mean?" I asked. Richard finally met my eyes, and his voice was flat, like he was reading a script. "You're a match, Ellie. You can save him." I should have felt something, pride maybe, or worry for Ethan. But all I could think was, why does this feel so wrong? They weren't asking me. They were telling me. Like my whole life had been leading up to this moment, and I didn't get a say. Susan reached out, grabbed my hand, and said, Ellie, you're Ethan's only hope. Her grip was too tight, her smile too forced. I nodded because what else could I do? But as I drove home that night, the rain still pounding, one thought kept looping in my head. They need me now. But why does it feel like a trap? Part 2. I couldn't shake that gut punch feeling from the night before. Susan's words, "You're Ethan's only hope," kept rattling in my head as I drove to the hospital the next morning. Bar Harbor was waking up, tourists snapping pics of the harbor, seagulls squawking over leftover fries. It all felt so normal, but I was a mess. Why did their sudden need for me feel like a setup? I gripped the steering wheel, my coffee sloshing in the cup holder, and tried to focus. Ethan was sick. My brother needed me. I had to step up, right? The hospital smelled like bleach and bad decisions. Richard and Susan were already in the waiting room, looking like they hadn't slept. Ethan was in a private room, hooked up to a million tubes. His face pale, but still smirking like he owned the place. The doctor, some guy with a clipboard and zero bedside manner, didn't waste time. Ethan needs a stem cell transplant, he said, all business. We've tested the family, and Ellie, you're a near-perfect genetic match. Lucky break. Lucky. I glanced at Susan, expecting relief. Maybe a thank you. She just nodded like I'd checked a box on her to-do list. Richard didn't even look up from his phone. I opened my mouth to ask about the procedure. What did it do to me? The risks? Normal questions. But Susan cut me off. It's straightforward, Ellie. You'll be fine. Her voice was sharp like I was a kid asking for candy before dinner. The doctor handed me a consent form, already filled out with my name. We've scheduled the donation for next week, he said, not even looking at me. I blinked. Next week? Don't I get a say in this? Richard finally spoke, his voice low and cold. This is for Ethan. You want him to die? I felt like I'd been slapped. Of course I didn't want Ethan to die. But the way they were acting, like I was a vending machine they could just punch a code into, made my stomach churn. I glanced at Ethan, hoping for, something human. He was staring at the ceiling, but then he snapped, What's your deal, Ellie? Just do it already. It's not like you've got anything better going on. I froze. The room went dead quiet. Then he kept going, his voice venomous. You think they kept you around for fun? This is why you're here. Your one damn job. It was like a bomb went off in my chest. Kept me around? What the hell was that supposed to mean? I looked at Susan, waiting for her to shut him up, but she just stared at her hands. Richard coughed, mumbled something about Ethan being stressed. I wanted to scream, to throw that stupid consent form in their faces, but my legs were jelly. I mumbled, I need some air, and bolted out of the room, my heart pounding so hard I thought I'd puke. Outside, I leaned against my car, the cold metal grounding me. Ethan's words kept replaying, This is why you're here. I wasn't just invisible to them, I was, what, a means to an end? I loved Ethan, or at least I thought I did, but this wasn't family, this was something else. I pulled out my phone, my hands shaking, and called Aunt Carol, Susan's sister. She was the only one in the family who ever seemed to give a damn about me. Ellie, what's wrong? She asked, her voice soft. I spilled everything, Ethan's illness, the transplant, his outburst. She went quiet for a long time, then said, You need to be careful, hun. There's stuff about your adoption. Maybe check the house. Old papers, anything. Adoption? I knew I was adopted. Richard and Susan told me when I was 10. Said they chose me, made it sound like a fairy tale. But Carol's tone, all hushed and serious, made my skin prickle. What wasn't I being told? I drove home, my mind racing. My apartment felt too small, too quiet. I paced, then stopped in front of the one family photo I kept on my desk. Me, Ethan, Richard, Susan, all smiling at some barbecue years ago. Except I wasn't really in the shot. Half my body was cut off, like I'd been photoshopped in as an afterthought. I stared at it, my chest tight, then grabbed the frame and smashed it on the floor. Glass scattered everywhere. I didn't care. That night, I couldn't sleep. Ethan's words, Carol's warning, the way Richard and Susan acted, it was all too much. I started thinking back, digging through memories I'd buried, like how they'd drag me to doctor's appointments every year, even when I wasn't sick, always muttering about my healthy genes. Or how Susan would get weirdly intense about my diet, saying I had to stay strong for the family. I'd thought it was just them being overprotective. Now it felt calculated. I grabbed my laptop and started Googling stem cell transplants, trying to understand what they were asking me to do. The risks weren't nothing. Infections, pain, long recovery. Why didn't they care how it'd affect me? I slammed the laptop shut, my hands shaking. I wasn't just mad, I was scared. Scared of what Ethan meant, scared of what I might find out. But I couldn't just sit there. Carol's words kept nagging at me. Check the house. The next day, I called in sick to a photo gig and drove to Richard and Susan's place. They were at the hospital, so the house was empty. I let myself in with the spare key, my heart hammering. The place smelled like lemon cleaner and old money. I stood in the living room, staring at the family photos on the mantel. All of Ethan, none of me. My throat burned. I wasn't here to feel sorry for myself. I headed to Richard's office, a room I'd always been told was off limits. If there was anything to find, it'd be there. I started with the desk drawers, nothing but bills and golf club receipts. Then, I checked the closet, the shelves, every damn corner. Just when I was about to give up, I spotted a metal box tucked under the bed, half hidden by a pile of old magazines. It was locked, but the clasp was rusty. I grabbed a letter opener from the desk and pried it open, my hands sweaty. Inside were papers, folders, and a stack of letters. My eyes caught one word on the top document: adoption. My stomach dropped. Whatever was in here, I knew it was going to change everything. My hands were shaking as I stared at that word, adoption, scrawled across the top of the paper. The metal box sat open on the floor of Richard's office, its contents spilling out like a crime scene. The house was dead quiet, just the hum of the fridge in the kitchen and my own ragged breathing. I felt like I was about to throw up, but I couldn't stop. I had to know. I grabbed the first folder, my fingers smudging the edges, and started reading. It was my adoption file, stuff I'd never seen before. Not the sanitized version they fed me as a kid, about how I was chosen and special. This was cold, clinical. Pages of medical records, genetic profiles, even a freaking contract. My name was there, Ellie Vance, but it didn't feel like me. It felt like I was reading about some lab experiment. Then I found it. A letter from a place called Gen Select, some shady-sounding agency. The words hit me like a brick. We confirm the child meets your specifications for maximum genetic compatibility with your son, Ethan Hayes. Payment received in full. Payment? Compatibility? I dropped the letter, my chest so tight I could barely breathe. They didn't adopt me, they bought me, like I was a damn spare part for Ethan. I kept digging, my hands moving faster now, tearing through papers. There were emails, printed out and stuffed in the back of the folder. One from Richard to Gen Select, dated a year before I was born. We need a child with a near-perfect match for our son's condition. Money's no object. Another from Susan, colder than I thought she could be. Ensure the child is healthy. We can't risk complications. I sat back on my heels, the room spinning. Ethan's bone marrow condition. They knew about it before I was even born. They picked me out like you'd pick an organ donor off a menu, raised me just to keep me on standby for him. My whole life was a lie. I wasn't their daughter. I was their insurance policy. I wanted to scream, to burn the whole house down, but I just sat there, staring at the papers scattered around me. Every memory I had, every dinner, every hug, every time they told me they loved me, felt fake now, poisoned. I thought about all the times they pushed me to get blood tests to stay healthy. It wasn't because they cared. It was because they needed my body in top shape for Ethan. I pressed my hands to my face, trying to hold it together, but a sob broke out anyway. I hated them. I hated me for believing them. I don't know how long I sat there, but my phone buzzing snapped me out of it. Aunt Carol, I answered, my voice barely a whisper. Ellie, you okay? She asked. I couldn't hold it in. I told her everything. The box, the papers, the truth. She went quiet, then sighed, heavy and sad. I suspected something, hun, but I didn't know it was this bad. They always treated you different. I'm so sorry. I gripped the phone, my knuckles white. Why didn't you tell me? She hesitated. I didn't have proof, and I didn't want to hurt you. Hurt me, I laughed, bitter and sharp. Too late for that. Carol begged me to stay calm, to not do anything rash. They're still your family, Ellie. Don't tear it all apart. Family? The word made my stomach turn. I hung up, not even saying goodbye. I was done listening to people who wanted to protect them. I stuffed the papers into my bag, every single one, and got the hell out of that house. The drive back to my apartment was a blur, my hands shaking so bad I nearly ran a red light. When I got home, I locked the door and dumped the papers on my kitchen table. I couldn't stop looking at them. Like if I stared long enough, they'd say something different. I didn't go to the hospital the next day, or the day after. Susan called nonstop, leaving voicemails that went from fake sweet to pissed off. Ellie, where are you? Ethan needs you. I deleted them all. Richard texted just one line. Don't be selfish. Selfish? I laughed so hard I almost cried. They'd built my entire life around Ethan, and now I was the selfish one? I wasn't going to give them a piece of me. Not my blood, not my cells, not a damn thing. But they weren't done with me. 3 days after I found the papers, I was in my car, parked outside a diner, trying to eat a burger and not lose my mind. My phone lit up with a text from a number I didn't know. It was a photo, a grainy, fake-looking shot of me, half naked, doing something I'd never done. My heart stopped. Another text. Keep this up and everyone sees these. I dropped my phone like it was on fire. Deepfakes. Someone was screwing with me, trying to ruin me. And I had a pretty good guess who. I drove straight to Aunt Carol's place, my hands shaking the whole way. She opened the door, took one look at my face, and pulled me inside. What now? She asked. I showed her the texts, my voice breaking. They're trying to destroy me, Carol, because I won't play their game. She hugged me tight, but I could tell she was scared too. You need to fight back, Ellie, she said, but be smart about it. Smart? I didn't even know where to start. All I knew was I wasn't going to let them win. That night, I sat in my apartment, the radio playing some old song Ethan and I used to sing along to as kids. It was one of the few good memories I had with him and belting out lyrics in the backseat of Richard's car. Now it just made me want to smash the radio to pieces. Everything I thought I knew about my life was a lie, and the people I called family were the ones holding the knife. I wasn't just hurt. I was pissed. They thought they could control me, scare me into submission. They had no idea who they were messing with. Those deep fake texts lit a fire under me. I was done being their pawn, done letting them think they could scare me into line. Sitting in my apartment, the papers from Richard's office still spread across my table, I felt something shift. I wasn't just hurt anymore. I was pissed, and I was ready to fight. They wanted to play dirty? Fine. I'd play dirtier. I started with the deep fakes. Whoever sent those texts wasn't exactly a genius. Sloppy work, pixelated edges, and a burner number that screamed amateur. I called Aunt Carol, who put me in touch with Jake, a lawyer friend of hers who knew his way around cybercrimes. We met at a diner in Bar Harbor, the kind with sticky tables and coffee that tasted like regret. I slid my phone across to him, showing the text. Can you trace this? I asked. He raised an eyebrow, scrolling through the fake photos. Someone's got it out for you. Yeah, I can dig into it. But you sure you want to open this can of worms? I leaned forward, my voice steady. They started this. I'm ending it. Jake got to work, and I didn't sit idle. I had a hunch Ethan was behind the deep fakes. Guy always had a vindictive streak. I remembered him bragging about his tech bro friends back in high school, the kind who'd hack a teacher's email for kicks. So I did some digging of my own. I still had access to Ethan's old laptop password from when we shared a family computer. Dumbass never changed it. I drove to Richard and Susan's place when they were at the hospital, let myself in, and fired up his laptop. Jackpot. There was a chat thread with some guy named Crypt Zero King, full of Ethan gloating about teaching my sister a lesson. He'd paid this dude to whip up the deep fakes and spread them to my clients, galleries, wedding planners, anyone who'd hired me. My blood boiled. He wasn't just sick, he was a snake. I screenshot everything, sent it to Jake, and kept searching. That's when I found a voice memo Ethan had recorded, probably by accident. He was drunk, laughing with his buddies, saying, "Ellie thinks she can walk away. Mom and Dad are cool with me handling her. She'll cave when her life's in the gutter." I hit pause, my hands shaking. Mom and Dad were cool with this? They knew? I copied the file to a USB drive, my heart pounding. This wasn't just Ethan being a jerk. This was a family conspiracy to break me. Jake called me the next day. "Got a lead on your hacker," he said. "Trace the burner number to a guy in Portland. Small time, works for cash. Ethan's name came up in his PayPal records." I clenched my fist, pacing my apartment. What now? Jake's voice was calm but firm. "We've got enough to go to the cops. Cyberstalking, defamation, maybe even extortion. But Ellie, this'll blow up your family. You ready for that?" I didn't hesitate. "They're not my family, do it." I wasn't done yet. I needed to face them, to see their lies crack in real time. I called Susan and told her I'd meet them at the hospital. When I walked into Ethan's room, the air was thick with tension. Richard stood by the window, arms crossed. Susan was next to Ethan's bed, her eyes red like she'd been crying for show. Ethan looked weaker, but his smirk was still there. I didn't sit. I stood tall, my bag heavy with the adoption papers and the USB drive. "I know everything," I said, my voice like steel. "The adoption, Gen Select. How you bought me to save Ethan. And now the deep fakes. You're pathetic." Susan gasped, her hand flying to her chest. "Ellie, how could you say that? We're your family." I laughed, sharp and cold. "Family? You used me. You raised me like a damn organ bank, and now you're trying to ruin me because I said no." Richard stepped forward, his face red. "You're out of line, young lady. You're tearing us apart." I didn't flinch. "You did that yourselves. I've got proof. Emails, payments, Ethan's little voice memo. It's over." Ethan tried to sit up, his face twisting. "You're bluffing. You wouldn't dare." I cut him off, tossing a printed screenshot of his chat with Crypt Zero King onto his bed. "Try me." Susan started sobbing, real tears this time, but I didn't buy it. "Ellie, please," she begged. "You're his sister." I shook my head, my voice low-side. "I was never your daughter, and I'm done being your puppet." I walked out, their shouts echoing behind me. My hands were shaking, but I felt free, like I'd finally ripped off a mask I'd been wearing my whole life. Jake was waiting outside, leaning against his car. "Cops have the evidence," he said. "They're looking into Gen Select, too. This is bigger than just your family." I nodded, my throat tight. "Good, let it burn." The fallout came fast. I got a call from a detective 2 days later. They'd raided the hacker's apartment, found a paper trail linking him to Ethan. The adoption agency was under investigation for illegal genetic matching. Turns out, I wasn't the only kid they'd placed for shady reasons. Richard and Susan's names were all over it. Ethan was facing charges for cyberstalking, maybe more if his health held up. I didn't care. I blocked their numbers, deleted their voicemails. Ethan sent one last text, a weak, "I'm sorry, but I didn't reply." I deleted his contact, my finger hovering over the screen for just a second before I hit confirm. I started hearing whispers around Bar Harbor. People at the coffee shop, the grocery store, they knew about the Hayes family scandal. For once, I wasn't the invisible one. I was the woman who'd taken them down. I sat in my favorite cafe one morning, sipping a latte, listening to two old guys at the counter gossip about that poor girl and those awful parents. I smirked into my coffee. Poor girl? Nah, I was a badass and I was just getting started. But they weren't done trying to claw me back. A week later, I got a call from a hospital in Portland. Susan had checked herself into psych, claiming a breakdown. Classic. I didn't buy it for a second. She'd always been a master at playing the victim. I wasn't falling for it, not this time. I had one last move to make, and I was going to make sure they'd never touch me again. Susan's breakdown was the final card they tried to play, and I wasn't buying it. I'd spent 30 years falling for their act. Fake tears, guilt trips, the whole damn playbook. Not anymore. I drove to Portland to check it out, not because I cared, but because I needed to be sure. I wasn't about to let them sneak one last lie past me. The hospital was sterile, all white walls and hushed voices. A nurse, this kind woman with tired eyes, pulled me aside after I asked about Susan. "She's putting on a show," she whispered, slipping me a visitor log. Susan had been meeting with a lawyer, not a therapist. Classic Hayes move. Fake a crisis to dodge the fallout. I thanked the nurse, my jaw tight, and walked out. That was it. They were done. I sent the log to Jake, who added it to the pile of evidence. The cops were already closing in. Gen Select got shut down, its records exposing a whole network of shady adoptions. Richard and Susan were hit with lawsuits from other families, their names dragged through the mud. Ethan. He was too sick to stand trial, but the cyberstalking charges stuck, and he was looking at jail time if he pulled through. I didn't feel sorry for him, not after everything. The Hayes family was crumbling, and I was the one holding the wrecking ball. Felt good, honestly. I needed a fresh start, so I packed up my life and moved to Portland. Bar Harbor was too small, too full of whispers and memories I wanted to burn. My new place was a cozy loft above a record store, the kind of spot where you could hear vinyls spinning through the floorboards. I threw myself into photography, taking on bigger gigs, art galleries, magazines, even a solo exhibit. For the first time, I was shooting for me, not to prove anything to anyone. I'd stand in my darkroom, watching images bloom on paper and feel whole, like I was finally the one calling the shots. Life started to feel good again. I met a guy, Sam, at a gallery opening. He was a carpenter, all calloused hands and quiet smiles. The opposite of the chaos I'd grown up with. We took it slow, coffee dates, walks along the waterfront, late nights talking about nothing and everything. He didn't push, didn't need me to be anything but me. A year later, I was staring at a positive pregnancy test, my hands shaking, but not from fear, from hope. I was going to be a mom, and my kid would never, ever have to wonder if they were loved. I didn't stop fighting, though. What happened to me wasn't just personal. It was wrong, and I wasn't the only one. I started a small foundation with some of the settlement money from the Gen Select case, helping kids caught up in shady adoptions find their voice. I wrote an article about my story, published it in a local paper, and it went viral. Next thing I knew, I was getting invites to speak at conferences, sharing my truth with rooms full of people. I'd stand there, looking out at the crowd, and think, I'm not invisible anymore. Some nights, I'd still wake up from nightmares. Richard's cold stare, Susan's fake tears, Ethan's smirk. But I'd roll over, feel Sam's arm around me, and know I was okay. I'd survived. Hell, I'd done more than survive. I'd built something real. Richard tried to reach out once. A letter sent through Jake. "I want to explain," it said. I didn't read past the first line. I tore it up, tossed it in the trash, and went back to editing photos. I didn't owe him a damn thing. Susan never tried. She was too busy playing victim in the press, claiming she'd been misled by Gen Select. Ethan's name faded from my life. Just a bad memory I didn't bother revisiting. I thought about finding my birth family sometimes, wondering if they were out there, if they'd wanted me, but I wasn't ready yet. "When the time's right, I'll look," I told Sam one night, my head on his chest. He just nodded, kissed my forehead. That was enough. One morning, I drove out to the coast, just me and my camera. The sun was rising over the Atlantic, painting the sky in pinks and golds. I stood on the rocky shore, the wind tugging at my hair, and lifted my camera. Click. The shutter snapped, capturing the light breaking through the clouds. I lowered the lens, my eyes stinging, and smiled. "This one's for me," I whispered. For the first time in my life, I wasn't shooting to prove I was enough. I was enough. Back home, I sat on the couch, my hand resting on my belly. The baby kicked, a tiny thump that made me laugh. I leaned down, my voice soft. "You're never gonna have to fight to be seen, kid. I've got you." I looked out the window, the Portland skyline glowing in the distance, and felt something I hadn't in years: peace. The Hayes family was a ghost, a shadow I'd left behind. I wasn't their spare part, their backup plan. I was Ellie Vance, photographer, survivor, soon to be mom, and I was free.